What if I told you that Prince William and Prince Harry's biggest regret isn't about their royal duties, their public mistakes, or their family conflicts? What if their deepest pain comes from a single phone call that lasted less than 5 minutes, a call where they were too busy playing to really talk to their mother? Tonight, I'm sharing the heartbreaking true story of Princess Diana's final phone call with her sons. A conversation that haunts Prince Harry and Prince William to this day, because they had no idea it would be their last chance to tell their mother they loved her. This isn't just another royal story. This is about the universal pain of taking our loved ones for granted, about conversations we wish we could have back, and about how a mother's love endures even when her children are too distracted to fully receive it. If you've ever rushed off the phone with someone you love, if you've ever taken a family member for granted, this story will change how you answer your next phone call. Please like and subscribe, because Princess Diana's final message to her sons is one that every family needs to hear. Balmoral Castle, Scotland, August 30th, 1997, 7:30 p.m. The ancient stone corridors of Balmoral Castle echoed with the laughter of children as Prince William, 15, and Prince Harry, 12, raced through the halls with their cousins Peter and Zara Phillips. It was the last weekend of their summer holiday in Scotland, and the boys were making the most of their freedom before returning to the rigid schedules that awaited them back in London. They had spent the day fishing on the River Dee, playing football on the castle grounds, and engaging in the kind of carefree childhood moments that were increasingly rare in their royal lives. For once, there were no official engagements, no photographers, no formal dinners, just two boys being boys in the one place where they could truly escape the weight of their birthright. When the phone rang in the castle's main sitting room, neither William nor Harry paid much attention. Phone calls were constant at Balmoral, staff coordination, security updates, family business. They continued their game of chase, their voices carrying through the halls as they dodged around furniture and raced up staircases. "Prince William, Prince Harry," called one of the staff members. "Your mother is on the telephone." The boys barely slowed down. Their mother had been in the south of France with Dodi Fayed for the past week, and they had spoken to her several times during her holiday. These calls had become routine, quick check-ins where Diana would ask about their activities and they would provide brief updates before rushing back to whatever they were doing. William reached the phone first, still slightly out of breath from running. On the other end of the line, calling from the Ritz Hotel in Paris, was Diana, Princess of Wales. She had just arrived in Paris with Dodi after their Mediterranean cruise, planning to spend one night in the city before flying back to London the next day to reunite with her sons. "Hello, darling." Diana's voice came through the receiver, warm and familiar. "How are you both? Are you having a wonderful time at Balmoral?" "Hi, Mum," William replied, glancing back at Harry, who was impatiently gesturing for him to hurry up. The game they had been playing was far from over, and both boys were eager to return to their cousins who were waiting in the next room. "We're fine," William continued, his response polite but distracted. "We've been playing all day. Harry caught a fish this morning. Well, sort of caught one. It was tiny." Diana laughed, that distinctive, joyful sound that her sons would replay in their minds for the rest of their lives. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I can't wait to hear all about it when I get home tomorrow. We'll have such a lovely time together before you go back to school." Harry had moved closer to the phone, eager to talk to his mother, but also conscious that their cousins were calling for them to return to their game. When William handed him the receiver, Harry's conversation was equally brief and casual. "Hi, Mummy," he said, unconsciously using the childhood name he hadn't quite outgrown. "When are you coming home exactly? Will you bring us anything from Paris?" "Tomorrow afternoon, my love," Diana replied. "And of course I'll bring you something special. I always do, don't I? I love you both so much." What happened next would haunt both princes for the rest of their lives. In the background, they could hear their cousins calling for them to come back and continue their game. The summer evening was perfect, their freedom was precious, and they were, after all, just children who wanted to play. The phone call with their mother seemed routine, unremarkable, just another of many conversations they would have with her. "We love you too, Mum," William said quickly. "But can we go now? We're in the middle of a game with Peter and Zara." "Goodbye, see you later," Harry added, already turning toward the door where their cousins were waiting. "Can I go off?" Diana's response was typical of her understanding nature as a mother. "Of course, darlings. Go and play. Have fun. I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll have all the time in the world to catch up properly." The call ended with the casual dismissal that characterizes so many family conversations, the assumption that there will always be another opportunity to talk, another chance to say the things that matter, another tomorrow to make up for today's rushed interactions. William hung up the phone and immediately rejoined the game, Harry close behind him. Neither boy gave the conversation another thought as they ran back to their cousins, their laughter once again filling the castle corridors. It was 7:35 p.m. on August 30th, 1997. In less than 7 hours, Princess Diana would be dead. But in that moment, as her sons raced away from the phone to continue their childhood games, none of them knew that they had just shared their final conversation. None of them knew that, "Goodbye, see you later," would be the last words her children would ever speak to her. And none of them knew that this brief, unremarkable phone call would become the source of a grief so profound that it would shape the rest of William and Harry's lives. The Ritz Hotel, Paris, August 30th, 1997, 8:45 p.m. As Princess Diana hung up the phone in her suite at the Ritz Hotel, she carried with her the sound of her sons' laughter and the casual warmth of their voices. The conversation had been brief, perhaps 4 minutes at most, but it had filled her with a contentment that only came from hearing that her children were happy and safe. She had no way of knowing that in hanging up that phone, she had just severed the last connection she would ever have with William and Harry. No way of knowing that the playful dismissal in their voices, "Can I go off?" would echo in their minds for decades to come. Diana had spent the week sailing through the Mediterranean with Dodi Fayed, enjoying a level of privacy and relaxation that was increasingly rare in her life. The paparazzi had followed them, of course, but the yacht had provided a sanctuary where she could swim, laugh, and simply exist without the constant scrutiny that defined her public existence. But even in those moments of peace, her thoughts had regularly turned to William and Harry. She had called them multiple times throughout the week, checking on their activities at Balmoral, sharing stories of her travels, maintaining the connection that was the most important thing in her world. "They sounded so happy," she told Dodi as they prepared for dinner. "William caught a fish today, or tried to, anyway. And Harry is so excited about starting the new school term. They're such wonderful boys." The pride in her voice was unmistakable. Despite all the challenges of her divorce from Charles, despite the constant media attention and royal protocol restrictions, Diana had succeeded in raising 2 sons who were, by all accounts, normal, happy children. That achievement meant more to her than any charitable work or public recognition ever could. What Diana didn't know was that 800 miles away in Scotland, her sons were already beginning to forget the details of their conversation. Within an hour of hanging up the phone, William and Harry were completely absorbed in their evening activities. Dinner with their cousins, games in the castle gardens, and the easy camaraderie that defined their summer holidays. If someone had asked them that evening what their mother had said during her call, they might have struggled to remember specifics. It had been a pleasant conversation, but unremarkable in the way that routine family communications often are. They expected to see her the next day, expected to have proper conversations then, expected that there would be countless opportunities in the future to really talk, to pay attention, to give her the focus she deserved. Meanwhile, in Paris, Diana was making the decisions that would lead to her death just hours later. She and Dodi had originally planned to have a quiet dinner at the hotel, but the crowd of photographers outside had made that impossible. The decision was made to leave the Ritz through the back entrance, using a backup car and driver while decoy vehicles left through the front to mislead the paparazzi. At 11:30 p.m., exactly 4 hours after speaking to her sons for the last time, Diana climbed into the back seat of a black Mercedes-Benz S280. Henri Paul, the deputy head of security at the Ritz who had been drinking earlier that evening, was behind the wheel. Dodi Fayed sat beside Diana in the back seat, while bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones rode in the front passenger seat. None of them were wearing seatbelts. As the Mercedes pulled away from the Ritz, Diana had no reason to think about danger. This was simply another car journey in a life filled with car journeys. She had no premonition, no sense of foreboding, no awareness that she was living through her final minutes. If she thought about anything during those last moments, it was likely about the next day's reunion with her sons. She was planning to take them shopping, to hear detailed stories about their summer adventures, to make up for all the brief, distracted phone calls with hours of focused attention. She was looking forward to seeing their faces when she gave them the gifts she had bought during her travels. She was anticipating their excitement about the new school term, their stories about friends and activities, their plans for the remaining days of summer. At 12:23 a.m. on August 31, 1997, The Mercedes entered the Pont de l'Alma tunnel at approximately 105 kilometers per hour, more than twice the speed limit. Henri Paul, with 3 times the legal limit of alcohol in his system, lost control of the vehicle. The car struck the 13th pillar of the tunnel with devastating force. Henri Paul and Dodi Fayed were killed instantly. Trevor Rees-Jones was severely injured but survived. Diana, unconscious and critically injured, was trapped in the wreckage. As emergency responders worked to free her from the twisted metal, Diana briefly regained consciousness. Her last recorded words, spoken to firefighter Xavier Gourmelin as he tried to help her, were, "My God, what's happened?" 3.5 hours later, at 4 a.m., Princess Diana was declared dead at the Piti-Salpêtrière hospital. She was 36 years old. At that exact moment, 800 miles away in Scotland, her sons were sleeping peacefully in their beds at Balmoral Castle, completely unaware that their world had just changed forever. They were still living in the innocent assumption that their mother would call them again tomorrow, that they would see her in the afternoon as planned, that there would be countless opportunities to have longer, more meaningful conversations. They had no idea that their casual dismissal, "Goodbye, see you later, can I go off?" had been their final words to the woman who loved them more than life itself. And they had no idea that when they woke up in a few hours, they would begin a lifetime of regret over a conversation they had been too busy to fully engage in. Balmoral Castle, Scotland, August 31, 1997, 7:15 a.m. Prince Charles woke before dawn in his private quarters at Balmoral, as was his custom. The early morning hours were his time for reflection and solitude before the day's responsibilities began. He had no idea that in a few minutes, he would receive a phone call that would shatter his family's world and thrust his young sons into a grief they were not prepared to handle. In their rooms down the hall, William and Harry slept peacefully, still exhausted from the previous day's activities. Their dreams were filled with fishing trips and games with their cousins, with the carefree joy that had defined their summer holiday. Neither boy stirred when the phone began ringing in their father's room. Charles answered on the second ring, expecting a routine call from his private secretary about the day's schedule. Instead, he heard the strained voice of Sir Robin Janvrin, the Queen's deputy private secretary, delivering news that would change everything. "Sir, I'm terribly sorry to have to tell you this, but there's been an accident in Paris. The Princess of Wales has been seriously injured in a car crash." Charles felt his world tilt. How serious? Is she? Will she be all right? The pause that followed told him everything he needed to know before Janvrin spoke the words that would haunt him forever. "I'm afraid not, sir. The princess died a few hours ago." "I'm so very sorry." For a moment, Charles couldn't process what he was hearing. Diana, who had called her sons just hours earlier, who was supposed to return home that afternoon, who had been planning a shopping trip with William and Harry, Diana was gone. His first thought, instinctively, was of his children sleeping peacefully just down the hall. How do you tell a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old that the mother they spoke to yesterday, the mother they were excited to see today, will never come home again? Charles's hands shook as he began making the necessary phone calls, to the Queen, to Diana's family, to his private secretary. But with each conversation, the reality became more crushing. He would have to wake his sons and deliver news that would devastate them. At 7:30 a.m., exactly 12 hours after William and Harry had rushed off the phone with their mother, Charles knocked softly on William's bedroom door. "William, could you come to my room, please? And bring Harry with you." The boys, still groggy with sleep, assumed this was about some change in the day's plans. Perhaps they were leaving Balmoral earlier than expected, or there was some royal duty that required their participation. They padded down the hall in their pajamas, Harry still rubbing sleep from his eyes. Charles sat them down on his bed, his face grave in a way that immediately made both boys more alert. In later interviews, both William and Harry would remember the sick feeling that began growing in their stomachs before their father even spoke. "Boys," Charles began, his voice carefully controlled, "I have some very sad news about Mummy." The words that followed would replay in William and Harry's minds for the rest of their lives. "There was a car accident in Paris last night. Mummy was hurt very badly, and I'm afraid she died." The silence that followed was deafening. Harry, at 12, couldn't fully comprehend what his father was saying. William, at 15, understood immediately but couldn't accept it. "No," William said quietly. "That's not. She was going to come home today. We were going to see her this afternoon." Harry's response was even more heartbreaking, "But I just talked to her yesterday. She said she loved us." What neither boy said in that moment, but what both would carry for decades, was the crushing realization that their last conversation with their mother had been rushed and casual. They had been too busy playing to really listen to her voice, too eager to return to their games to tell her how much they loved her. The conversation that had seemed so ordinary, so unremarkable, was now revealed to be precious beyond measure. Every word she had spoken to them, asking about their day, expressing excitement about seeing them, telling them she loved them, had been part of her final message to her children. And their response had been to hurry her off the phone. "We should have talked to her longer," Harry whispered, the first expression of a guilt that would torment him for years. "We should have stayed on the phone." William, trying to be strong as the older brother, put his arm around Harry. But inside, he was thinking the same thing. If they had known it was their last conversation, they would have said so much more. They would have told her about every detail of their day, shared every thought and feeling, made sure she knew how much she meant to them. Instead, their final words to their mother had been a casual dismissal. "Goodbye, see you later. Can I go off?" Charles tried to comfort them, explaining that there was no way they could have known, that their mother understood how much they loved her, that she would want them to remember all the wonderful conversations they had shared over the years. But for William and Harry, no amount of reassurance could erase the weight of that final phone call. In the space of a few minutes, a routine conversation had been transformed into a source of lifelong regret. As the news spread throughout Balmoral and then to the world, as preparations began for the most watched funeral in history, as the entire British nation entered a period of unprecedented mourning, William and Harry were grappling with a pain that was both universal and uniquely their own. They had learned, in the cruelest possible way, that every conversation with someone you love could be your last. They had discovered that the casual moments we take for granted, the quick phone calls, the hurried goodbyes, the assumption that there will always be tomorrow, are actually precious gifts that can be snatched away without warning. And they were beginning a journey of grief that would be complicated by the knowledge that their final words to their mother had been rushed, distracted, and utterly inadequate to express the depth of their love for her. Balmoral Castle, Scotland, September 2, 1997, 3 days after the funeral. The world had watched as two young princes walked behind their mother's coffin through the streets of London, their faces composed despite the unimaginable grief they were carrying. Now, in the quiet aftermath of the most public funeral in history, William and Harry were left to confront the private weight of their loss. The castle felt different now. Every room held memories of their mother's visits, every phone that rang made them think of her voice. But most haunting of all was the sitting room where they had taken her final call just 3 days earlier, a call that had seemed so ordinary at the time and now felt like the most significant conversation of their lives. Prince Harry, at 12, was struggling to understand the permanence of death. He kept expecting his mother to call, kept listening for her laughter in the corridors, kept waiting for her to walk through the door with stories of her travels and gifts from Paris. "I keep thinking about what we said to her," he confided to William as they sat in their favorite spot by the castle's windows. "We were so mean. We didn't want to talk to her." William, despite being only 15, was already showing the protective instincts that would define his relationship with his younger brother for the rest of their lives. "We weren't mean, Harry. We were just being kids. Mummy understood that." But privately, William was tormented by the same thoughts. In the 3 days since learning of their mother's death, he had replayed that final conversation countless times, analyzing every word, every tone, every missed opportunity to express what she meant to them. The details of the conversation, which had seemed unimportant at the time, were now seared into their memories with painful clarity. Diana asking about their day, and their brief, distracted responses. Her telling them she loved them, and their casual acknowledgement. Her excitement about seeing them the next day, met with their eagerness to end the call. Their final words, "Goodbye, see you later. Can I go off?" Those words, "Can I go off?" would haunt Harry for decades. In his 2023 memoir, Spare, he would write about the crushing weight of that phrase, the way it captured everything wrong with their final interaction. His mother had reached out to connect with them, and they had asked permission to leave. Prince Charles, recognizing his son's struggle, arranged for them to speak with grief counselors. But both boys found it difficult to articulate the specific nature of their pain. How do you explain that your grief is complicated by regret? How do you express the weight of words you wish you could take back? "I can't necessarily remember what I said," Harry would later recall in a documentary about their mother, "but all I do remember is regretting for the rest of my life how short the phone call was." William's guilt was different but equally profound. As the older brother, he felt responsible for setting the tone of the conversation. He had been the first to indicate they wanted to end the call, the first to express impatience with their mother's attempt to connect. "If I'd known what was going to happen, I wouldn't have been quite so blasé about it," William would later say. "That phone call sticks in my mind quite heavily." The boys began to understand something that most children their age never have to face: the irreversible nature of final moments. There would be no opportunity to have that conversation again, no chance to give their mother the attention she deserved, no way to tell her all the things they had left unsaid. Their grief was complicated by the public nature of their loss. The entire world was mourning Princess Diana, sharing memories of her kindness, her charitable work, her public warmth. But William and Harry's most vivid recent memory of their mother was not of her public persona but of a private moment they now viewed as a failure. The irony was not lost on them. Millions of people around the world were celebrating Diana's life and mourning her death, while her own sons were consumed with guilt over their final interaction with her. In the weeks that followed, as they returned to school and attempted to resume some semblance of normal life, both boys found themselves approaching phone calls differently. Every conversation with family members became precious, every goodbye carried weight, every casual dismissal felt like a betrayal of the lesson their mother's death had taught them. Harry would later describe this period as the beginning of his understanding that life could change in an instant, that the people you love could be taken away without warning, that every interaction carried the potential to be your last. "Looking back on it now, it's incredibly hard," he would say years later. "I have to deal with that for the rest of my life. Not knowing that it was the last time I'd speak to my mum, how differently that conversation would have panned out if I'd had even the slightest inkling that her life was going to be taken that night." William, meanwhile, was learning to carry the weight of responsibility that would define his future role as heir to the throne. But underneath that public composure was a young man grappling with a private pain that no amount of royal training had prepared him for. The final phone call with their mother had taught both princes a lesson that would shape their approach to relationships for the rest of their lives. Never take a conversation for granted, never assume there will be another opportunity to say what matters, never let the urgent override the important. But this wisdom had come at the cruelest possible price: the loss of the person they loved most in the world, and the knowledge that their last words to her had been a rushed dismissal rather than the loving farewell she deserved. Kensington Palace, London, 1 year later, August 30th, 1998. The first anniversary of their mother's death approached like a storm cloud that William and Harry could see coming but were powerless to avoid. They had survived a year of firsts: the first Christmas without her, the first Mother's Day, the first family gathering where her absence felt like a physical presence. But this anniversary felt different. It marked not just a year since Diana's death, but a year since that final, terrible phone call. 365 days of living with the knowledge that their last words to their mother had been inadequate, hurried, thoughtless. Now 16 and 13, the princes had matured rapidly in the crucible of public grief. They had learned to maintain composure during memorial services, to speak graciously about their mother's legacy, to fulfill their royal duties while carrying an invisible weight that few people their age could understand. But privately, the regret had only deepened. Harry, now a teenager, had developed what his later therapists would recognize as a form of survivor's guilt. He had begun to blame himself not just for the brevity of that final call, but for the accident itself. In his adolescent mind, he constructed elaborate scenarios where a longer conversation might have delayed their mother's departure from the hotel, might have changed the timing that led to the fatal crash. "What if we had kept her on the phone longer?" he asked William during one of their late-night conversations in the room they shared at Kensington Palace. "What if she had stayed at the hotel just 10 more minutes? Would she still be alive?" William, despite his own struggles, tried to provide the rational perspective that his brother needed. "Harry, you can't think like that. The accident wasn't our fault. Mummy would be devastated if she knew you were blaming yourself." But William's own rational mind couldn't quiet his emotional torment. He had begun to dream about that phone call, to wake up with his mother's voice in his ears saying, "I love you both so much," while his dream self responded with the same distracted dismissal. He would lie awake replaying different versions of the conversation, scenarios where he had asked about her day in detail, where he had told her about his feelings and fears, where he had said a proper goodbye. The boys had started a ritual that they kept secret from their father and the palace staff. Every Sunday evening at 7:30 p.m., The time their mother had called that final night, they would sit together in silence for exactly 4 minutes, the duration they estimated their last conversation had lasted. During these 4 minutes, they would think about all the things they wished they had said to her. How proud they were to be her sons. How much they appreciated the way she had tried to give them normal childhoods despite their royal roles. How they understood now, in a way they couldn't as children, the sacrifices she had made for them. How sorry they were for all the times they had been too busy, too distracted, too focused on their own concerns to fully appreciate her presence in their lives. These Sunday vigils became a form of penance, a way of honoring their mother's memory while acknowledging their own failure to honor her properly in life. The weight of their regret was compounded by the public narrative surrounding Diana's death. The world remembered her as the people's princess, the woman who brought warmth and humanity to the royal family. But William and Harry's most recent memory of their interaction with her was cold, distant, dismissive. They watched documentaries about their mother's charitable work, her connection with ordinary people, her ability to make everyone feel heard and valued. And they knew that in her final conversation with the two people she loved most in the world, she had not received that same attention and respect. Charles, recognizing his son's ongoing struggle, arranged for them to meet with Dr. Julia Samuel, a grief counselor who had been close to Diana. During their sessions, both boys began to understand that their guilt, while painful, was also a form of love, a testament to how much their mother had meant to them. "Your mother knew you loved her," Dr. Samuel told them. "She understood that you were children, that you couldn't have known it was your last conversation. Your guilt is proof of your love, but it's not proof of your failure." But understanding the psychology of grief and accepting it emotionally were two different things. Both boys continued to struggle with the weight of that final phone call, each processing it in their own way. William began to develop an almost obsessive attention to detail in his own communications with loved ones. He would end every phone call with "I love you," would make sure every goodbye was meaningful, would never rush off the phone with family members no matter how urgent other matters seemed. Harry, meanwhile, went in the opposite direction. He began to avoid emotional conversations altogether, finding it easier to keep relationships surface level than to risk the vulnerability that deep connection required. If you didn't get close to people, you couldn't hurt them with your carelessness. If you didn't let people depend on your attention, you couldn't fail them the way he felt he had failed his mother. Both responses were attempts to manage the central trauma of their loss. The knowledge that love, no matter how deep, can be inadequately expressed, and that time, no matter how abundant it seems, can run out without warning. As the anniversary of their mother's death approached, both princes knew they would be expected to participate in public commemorations, to speak about her legacy, to represent the royal family's grief. But their private commemoration would be different. At 7:30 p.m. on August 30th, 1998, exactly 1 year after that final phone call, William and Harry sat together in the same room where they had spoken to their mother for the last time. And for 4 minutes, they held space for all the words they wished they had said, all the love they wished they had expressed, all the attention they wished they had given to the woman who had loved them unconditionally. It was a ritual they would continue, in various forms, for the rest of their lives. Because some regrets are too profound to ever fully heal, and some love is too deep to ever adequately express, especially when you only realize its true value after it's gone forever. St. James's Palace, London, August 31st, 2017, 20 years later. 2 decades had passed since that devastating phone call, and Prince William and Prince Harry were no longer the children who had rushed off the phone with their mother. William, now 35, was married to Catherine and a father of 2 young children. Harry, 32, was about to marry Meghan Markle. Both had become global figures in their own right, carrying forward their mother's charitable legacy while building their own families and futures. But on this 20th anniversary of Diana's death, as they prepared to participate in a documentary about their mother's life, both men found themselves returning to that final conversation with a perspective that only 2 decades of life experience could provide. The documentary, Diana, Our Mother, Her Life and Legacy, would mark the first time both princes spoke publicly and in detail about their last phone call with their mother. It was a decision that neither had taken lightly, but both felt it was time to share their experience in hopes of helping others who might be struggling with similar regrets. "I think it's important for people to understand," William said during filming, "that even in the royal family, even with all our protocol and training, we're still just human beings who make the same mistakes everyone else makes. We took our mother for granted, and we've had to live with that." The intervening 20 years had taught both men profound lessons about parenthood, loss, and the preciousness of time with loved ones. William, as a father, now understood in a visceral way what his mother must have felt during that final phone call. He had experienced countless bedtime calls with his own children when they were visiting grandparents, brief conversations where George and Charlotte were eager to end the call and return to their activities. The difference was that William would see his children again the next day. When I call my children now, William reflected, I remember that phone call with Mummy. I never rush them off the phone, even when I know they want to go play. Because you just never know. Harry's perspective had been shaped by his own struggles with mental health and his eventual acceptance of therapy to deal with his unresolved grief. Through professional help, he had come to understand that his guilt over the phone call had been compounded by the trauma of losing his mother at such a young age. I spent years thinking that I had somehow failed her in that last conversation, Harry explained. But my therapist helped me understand that I was a 12-year-old boy who loved his mother and couldn't have known what was coming. The guilt wasn't really about the phone call. It was about losing her before I was mature enough to express how much she meant to me. The documentary revealed that both princes had struggled for years with the specific memory of their final words to their mother. Harry's request to go off had haunted him through adolescence and into adulthood, becoming a symbol of his perceived failure to prioritize his mother's love over his immediate desires. I can't necessarily remember what I said, Harry admitted in the documentary, but all I do remember is regretting for the rest of my life how short the phone call was. If I'd known that that was the last time I was going to speak to my mother, the things I would have said to her. William's regret was equally profound but differently expressed. At the time, Harry and I were running around, minding our own business, playing with our cousins and having a very good time. We were in a desperate rush to say goodbye. See you later. If I'd known what was going to happen, I wouldn't have been quite so blasé about it. That phone call sticks in my mind quite heavily. The documentary also revealed how their mother's death and their regret over that final conversation had shaped their approach to parenting. Both men were determined to be fully present with their children, to never take family conversations for granted, to ensure that their children always knew they were loved and prioritized. Catherine, William's wife, spoke about how the tragedy had influenced her husband's parenting style. William is incredibly deliberate about making sure the children know they're heard and valued. If they want to talk, even about something silly, he stops everything and listens. I think he's determined that his children will never have to carry the regret he's carried. The 20th anniversary also marked a turning point in how both princes spoke about their mother's death. For the first time, they began to focus not just on their regret over that final phone call, but on the broader lesson it contained for everyone. We want people to understand, William said during the documentary, that this could happen to anyone. Every parent, every child, every family member should remember that any conversation could be your last. Don't take those moments for granted. Harry added his own perspective, shaped by years of therapy and personal growth. The pain of losing someone is bad enough without adding the weight of regret. Tell the people you love that you love them. Don't rush off the phone. Don't assume there will always be tomorrow. Their message resonated powerfully with viewers around the world. The documentary sparked a global conversation about the importance of being present with loved ones, about the danger of taking family relationships for granted, about the preciousness of ordinary moments that can become extraordinary in memory. Social media filled with stories of people calling their parents after watching the documentary, of families making commitments to put down phones during dinner conversations, of children and parents having deeper talks inspired by William and Harry's painful honesty. But perhaps the most profound impact was on the princes themselves. By sharing their story, by acknowledging their regret publicly, they had finally begun to transform their pain into purpose. Dr. Julia Samuel, the grief counselor who had worked with both boys in the aftermath of their mother's death, reflected on their journey. What William and Harry have done is take their deepest regret and use it to help others avoid the same pain. That's exactly what Diana would have wanted, for her son's experience to become a source of healing for other families. 20 years after that devastating phone call, both princes had learned to carry their regret differently. It would never disappear completely. Some wounds are too deep to fully heal, but it had become a source of wisdom rather than just pain. William, now a father of 3, made it a point to end every phone call with his children by saying, "I love you," and asking if there was anything else they wanted to talk about. He had learned to resist the urge to hurry conversations along, no matter how busy his schedule. Harry, in his own relationships, had learned to be vulnerable and present in ways that his younger self could never have imagined. His marriage to Meghan was built on a foundation of honest communication, partly because he had learned the cost of leaving things unsaid. Both men had also developed a ritual for the anniversary of their mother's death that honored both their grief and their growth. Each August 31st, they would call each other at exactly 7:30 p.m. and talk for as long as either of them wanted. No rushing, no cutting conversations short, no assuming there would always be another opportunity. These calls often lasted hours, covering everything from memories of their mother to concerns about their children to hopes for the future. They had learned to give each other the gift of attention, the gift they wished they had given their mother in that final conversation. As the documentary concluded, both princes shared their most important message: that love should never be left unexpressed, that attention should never be withheld, and that every goodbye should be said as if it might be the last. "Our mother knew we loved her," William said in the final moments of the documentary. "But I wish she had known it from that last conversation, not just from a lifetime of other moments. Don't let the people you love wonder. Tell them. Show them. Give them your full attention, especially when they reach out to you." Harry's final words were equally powerful. If our story can help even one family avoid the regret we've carried, then maybe our pain has served a purpose. Maybe that's part of Mummy's legacy too, teaching people to love each other better while there's still time. The documentary ended with home video footage of Diana with her young sons, laughing and playing together, full of the joy and love that had defined their relationship. But now viewers understood the full weight of those moments, how precious they were, how quickly they could be lost, how important it was to be fully present for every single one. 20 years after rushing off the phone with their mother for the last time, William and Harry had finally found a way to honor both their regret and her memory. They had learned that the greatest tribute to someone you love is to love others better because of what their loss taught you. And in sharing their pain so publicly, so honestly, they had given the world a gift that Diana herself would have been proud of: the reminder that love is too precious to hurry through, too important to take for granted, and too powerful to leave unexpressed. Their mother's final phone call had ended with a rushed goodbye. But its legacy would live on in every family conversation that was given the time and attention it deserved, every "I love you" that was said instead of assumed, every phone call that was treasured instead of hurried. In the end, that was perhaps the most fitting memorial to Princess Diana. Not a statue or a fund, but millions of families loving each other more intentionally because her sons had the courage to share their deepest regret with the world. 27 years have passed since Princess Diana's sons rushed off the phone with her for the last time. That 4-minute conversation has become one of the most tragic final exchanges in modern history. Not because of what was said, but because of what was left unsaid, not because it was cruel, but because it was so heartbreakingly ordinary. William and Harry's story teaches us the most important lesson any of us can learn. Every conversation with someone we love could be our last. Every phone call from a parent, every text from a sibling, every bedtime story with a child carries within it the potential to become a final memory. The princes have spent nearly 3 decades living with the weight of their casual dismissal of their mother's love that night. Their pain reminds us that goodbye, see you later are not just words, they are possibilities, hopes, assumptions about a future that may never come. But their story also shows us the redemptive power of honest regret. By sharing their pain, by admitting their failure to be present with their mother when she reached out to them, William and Harry have given the world a gift more valuable than any royal charity or public service: the reminder to love people while we still can. Tonight, someone you love might call you while you're busy, while you're distracted, while you have other things on your mind. Will you rush them off the phone? Will you give them half your attention while your mind is elsewhere? Or will you remember 2 young princes who learned too late that the most important thing they could ever do was simply listen to their mother's voice? If Princess Diana's son's story breaks your heart the way it breaks mine, if their regret reminds you to be more present with the people you love, please share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to honor Diana's memory and the lesson her final phone call teaches us all. Because in the end, we cannot control how much time we have with the people we love. But we can control how much attention we give them while they're here. We can choose to be present instead of distracted, loving instead of hurried, grateful instead of careless. Don't let your last words to someone you love be, "Can I go?" Let them be, "I love you, and I'm so grateful you called." Princess Diana's sons have lived with their regret for 27 years. Learn from their pain. Love better while there's still time.